The fluorescent lights of Harvard Medical School's West Wing were the only witnesses when Eleanor Ellie Chen rolled her cart through the empty corridor at 2:17 a.m. The hospital had fallen into that peculiar hush that exists only in the deepest hours of night, when even the machines seem to breathe more quietly. For 14 years, Ellie had worked the overnight shift as the school's resident nurse, tending to the occasional research student who'd pushed too hard, the professor who'd forgotten to eat, the maintenance worker with a twisted ankle. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Her footsteps echoed softly against the polished floors as she made her final rounds, checking supplies that could wait until morning. But old habits died hard, and Ellie was nothing if not thorough. She paused outside Laboratory 7B, noticing a thin line of light escaping beneath the door. Odd. According to the schedule, no experiments were authorized for overnight hours this week. Budget cuts had trimmed even the most ambitious research. Teams back to standard hours. Ellie hesitated, then gently knocked. No answer. She tried the handle, unlocked, and pushed the door open just enough to peek inside. "Hello, anyone still working? I'm just doing final rounds before..." The words died in her throat. The lab was empty of people, but alive with activity. 3 centrifuges hummed in perfect synchronization. A computer monitor displayed cascading data in real time. And there, spread across the central workstation, was what appeared to be hundreds of glass slides arranged in a pattern that made no logical sense to Ellie at first glance. It wasn't the standard grid organization taught in every medical course. It looked almost musical, like sheet music translated into biological samples. Ellie stepped fully into the room, professional concern overriding hesitation. Unauthorized experiments left running unattended were strictly against protocol, potentially dangerous depending on the materials involved. She approached the workstation, careful not to disturb anything, and leaned in to examine the nearest slide. That's when she noticed the labels. Not the standard Harvard medical coding system, but handwritten notes in crisp, precise lettering. Not just identification markers, but observations, variations, timestamps arranged in what appeared to be some kind of sequence. And most curiously, each note ended with the same symbol, a small, elegant helix, drawn slightly differently each time, as if capturing evolution itself. Ellie's eyes widened as she began to understand what she was seeing. These weren't random samples, this was a progression. Someone had been tracking minute cellular changes across what must have been hundreds of hours of observation, documenting a phenomenon that... She straightened suddenly, her heart racing. This couldn't be what she thought it was. The Kaufman Protocol, the holy grail of regenerative medicine that had eluded Harvard's top researchers for nearly a decade. The theoretical approach to cellular regeneration that Dr. Miranda Kaufman had proposed before her death 3 years ago, but that no one had been able to successfully implement. The research path that the department had officially abandoned last spring after millions in funding led nowhere. Yet here it was, or some version of it, playing out across these slides like a visual symphony. Ellie had spent enough years around medical research to recognize breakthrough work when she saw it, even if the specifics were beyond her nursing training. But who would be working on this abandoned project in secret, and why in the middle of the night? The soft click of a door closing somewhere down the hall snapped Ellie from her thoughts. Someone was coming. Quickly, she pulled her phone from her pocket and took several photos of the arrangement, careful not to disturb anything. Then she slipped back into the hallway, heart pounding, and around the corner just as footsteps approached Laboratory 7B. Pressing herself against the wall, Ellie held her breath as the footsteps paused at the lab door, then continued inside. She risked a glance around the corner and caught sight of a young woman in a standard lab coat, no ID badge visible from this angle. carrying a tray of what appeared to be freshly prepared samples. The woman couldn't have been more than 25, not a professor, possibly not even a graduate student. From her vantage point, Ellie could see dark circles under the woman's eyes, her shoulders slightly hunched, as if carrying far more weight than just the tray in her hands. Ellie retreated silently, mind racing. She should report the unauthorized use of the lab. That was protocol. That was her job. But something stopped her. The same instinct that had made her an exceptional nurse for decades. That arrangement of slides wasn't the work of someone reckless or careless. It was meticulous, passionate, purposeful. Whatever was happening in Laboratory 7B went beyond simple rule-breaking, and Ellie wanted to understand it before bureaucracy potentially shut it down. Back in her small office near the emergency clinic area, Ellie uploaded the photos to her tablet and zoomed in on the handwritten notes. The handwriting was distinctive, small, precise, with peculiar loops on certain letters. Something about it nagged at her memory, but she couldn't place it. She began researching the Kaufman protocol, accessing medical journal archives that, as a senior staff member, she had permission to view. Dr. Miranda Kaufman's work had been revolutionary, but incomplete when cancer took her life. Her theory suggested a method for controlled cellular regeneration that could potentially revolutionize treatment for everything from severe burns to neurodegenerative diseases. But after her death, the research team had hit wall after wall. The last published paper concluded that a fundamental element was missing from Kaufman's equations, something she had perhaps known but never documented. As dawn broke over Cambridge, Ellie had made her decision. She would wait and watch. For 3 nights, she adjusted her rounds to casually pass Laboratory 7B at different hours. The pattern was consistent, between approximately 1:30 a.m. and 4:45 a.m. The lab was occupied by the same young woman, always alone, always intensely focused. On the 3rd night, Ellie noted something new. The woman appeared to be weeping quietly as she adjusted something under a microscope, then frantically making notes as she observed the result. By the 4th night, Ellie had done enough research on staff records to have a theory about the mystery researcher's identity. Sarah Lynn, not even a graduate student, but a laboratory technician hired 6 months ago to clean equipment and prepare basic materials for the real scientists. Undergraduate degree in biology from a state university. No remarkable recommendations, no published papers. Nothing in her background suggested she should or could be conducting cutting-edge research on cellular regeneration. Nothing except the hours she was keeping and the work Ellie had glimpsed. At precisely 2:43 a.m. on that 4th night, Ellie knocked firmly on the door of Laboratory 7B, then entered without waiting for a response. Sarah Lynn looked up from her microscope, face draining of color, hands instinctively moving to cover her notes. "I'm not here to report you," Ellie said calmly, closing the door behind her. "I'm here because I've been watching your work for 4 nights now, and I think you're onto something that matters." Sarah's hands trembled slightly. "I have permission to be here," she said, the lie transparent in her voice. Ellie smiled gently. "No, you don't. But that's not the question that interests me. What interests me is how a lab technician is conducting advanced research on the Kaufman protocol when Harvard's finest minds declared it a dead end." Sarah's eyes widened. "How did you? I've worked here for 14 years. You learn to recognize patterns." Ellie moved closer, her voice softening. "The question is, why are you doing it alone, in secret, in the middle of the night?" For a moment, Sarah seemed to consider further denials, but exhaustion and perhaps the simple human need to share a burden won out. "Because no one would listen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I tried. When I first noticed the discrepancy in their approach, I wrote it up, submitted it through proper channels. It was dismissed without even being reviewed. Lab technicians clean equipment. They don't solve theoretical problems. Those were the exact words. Ellie nodded, unsurprised. But you kept going. I had to. Sarah gestured to her notebooks. Dr. Kaufman was right. Her approach works, but not with the standard cellular incubation periods everyone was using. The regeneration cascade needs micro-intervals of stimulation followed by precisely timed rest periods. It's not constant, it's rhythmic, like breathing. Her eyes lit up as she spoke, fatigue momentarily forgotten. No one was seeing it because they were all looking at it wrong. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. They were treating it like a mathematical equation when it's more like music. Ellie felt a chill run through her. "Show me," she said simply. Without hesitation, Sarah led her to the microscope and adjusted the settings. "This sample has been treated according to my modified protocol for 72 hours. Watch what happens when I introduce the marker dye." Ellie looked through the lens and watched as Sarah added a drop of solution. Before her eyes, cells that should have remained dormant according to conventional understanding began to transform, their membranes pulsing in a coordinated rhythm as new growth initiated at a rate that should have been impossible. Ellie straightened, searching for words. Exactly what Dr. Kaufman predicted would happen, but no one could replicate, Sarah finished for her. "It works, Ms. Chen. It actually works. Please, call me Ellie." She looked around the lab. "With new understanding. How long have you been doing this?" "Almost 5 months now. I started with basic experiments after hours, just testing my theory. Then when I saw the first positive results, Sarah hesitated. "I might have borrowed some equipment from storage and used supplies that were meant to be discarded, and accessed journal archives I'm not technically authorized to read." Instead of disapproval, Ellie felt a surge of admiration. This young woman had accomplished with determination and insight what teams of Harvard's elite researchers had failed to do with millions in funding. "Why didn't you just take this elsewhere? Another university, a private lab?" Sarah's expression darkened. "With what credentials? I'm a lab tech with a bachelor's degree from a state school. My parents refinanced their home just to help me get this job at Harvard. I have student loans to pay. I can't just walk into Johns Hopkins or MIT and say, 'Hey, I solved the problem your best people couldn't.'" "Ooh," she gestured around the lab. "This was the only way I could access the equipment I needed, and..." Her voice softened. "Dr. Kaufman deserves to have her work validated here, where she did her research. It feels wrong to take it elsewhere." Ellie considered this remarkable young woman before her. Brilliant, determined, yet pushed to work in shadows because of academic hierarchies and credentials that had nothing to do with her actual abilities. Something fierce and protective awakened in Ellie, a feeling she'd experienced before when witnessing genuine injustice. "You need an advocate," she said finally. Sarah gave a bitter laugh. "What I need is a PhD and a family name on the donor wall." "No." Ellie shook her head firmly. "What you need is someone who knows this institution and its people, someone who can navigate its politics, someone who has built trust over years of service, someone like you." Sarah looked skeptical. "People underestimate nurses, Sarah. They think we just take vitals and follow orders. But we're the ones who see everything, the patterns, the details others miss. We're the ones who know how systems really work, because we're inside them every day." Ellie smiled. "And I've been inside Harvard Medical for 14 years. I know exactly who needs to see this work and how to make them actually look." Sarah stared at her, hope and doubt warring in her expression. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Ellie glanced at the slides arranged in their unusual pattern, then back to Sarah. Because what you're doing here matters, because talent shouldn't be wasted due to arbitrary barriers, and because 14 years ago I was told that nurses don't make research contributions either. She reached for Sarah's notebook. Now, show me everything you've documented so far. If we're going to present this to someone who can help, we need to make your case irrefutable. For the next hour, Sarah walked Ellie through her methodology, findings, and the precise adaptations she'd made to the Kaufman protocol. As the lab technician explained her insights, Ellie was struck by the elegant simplicity of the solution, a rhythmic approach to cellular stimulation that mimicked natural biological processes rather than forcing constant acceleration. "It's beautiful," Ellie murmured, reviewing Sarah's notes. "And you figured this out just by observing the failed attempts in the published literature?" Sarah hesitated. "Not exactly. I used to play cello. When I was looking at the time-lapse footage of the failed experiments, I recognized something in the way the cells were responding. It wasn't random failure. They were being overwhelmed by constant stimulation. They needed rest intervals, just like music needs rests between notes. The pattern was there, just not where anyone was looking for it. A musician's insight solving what medical researchers couldn't see," Ellie said thoughtfully. "Dr. Kaufman was a pianist, wasn't she?" Sarah nodded eagerly. "Yes, that's what made me wonder if she might have been thinking along similar lines. There are notations in her personal research journals that don't make sense in standard scientific terminology, but would make perfect sense to a musician." Ellie checked her watch, 4:30 a.m. "You need to pack up for the night. Can you meet me tomorrow evening before your unofficial research hours? There's someone I think should see this." Sarah hesitated. "If this gets reported, it won't be. Not by me, and not by the person I have in mind." Ellie fixed her with a steady gaze. "Trust me, Sarah, you've carried this alone long enough." As Sarah carefully stored her samples and notes, Ellie helped reset the lab to its daytime appearance, making sure nothing would raise suspicions among the regular staff. Together they worked in companionable silence, two women united by a shared secret and growing respect. At the door, Sarah paused. "Thank you," she said simply, "for not reporting me, for listening." "Get some rest," Ellie replied. "Tomorrow is going to be a turning point for your research, and maybe for a lot more." After Sarah departed, Ellie remained in the corridor for a few moments, mind racing with possibilities. She'd need to be strategic about this. Approach the right person in exactly the right way. In 14 years at Harvard Medical, she'd learned which faculty members valued truth over hierarchy, innovation over convention, and most importantly, who had the influence to protect a promising discovery from being buried by academic politics. She thought of Dr. Nathan Winters, the department's most respected neurologist who had lost his wife to the same condition Dr. Kaufman's protocol might eventually help treat. Dr. Winters was brilliant, ethical, and, crucially, powerful enough within the institution to champion unorthodox work if he believed in its merit. He was also one of the few senior researchers who treated the nursing staff as equals, often seeking their observations about patients that other doctors might overlook. As dawn painted the eastern windows of the medical school, Ellie finished her shift with a renewed sense of purpose. Sometimes the most important discoveries happened not in the spotlight of well-funded labs, but in the margins, in the quiet hours when convention slept and determination kept working. And sometimes the most significant moments in medical history began not with prestigious grants or celebrated researchers, but with a nurse making rounds at 2:17 a.m. who noticed something she wasn't supposed to see. Before heading home, Ellie sent a carefully worded message to Dr. Winters requesting a private meeting the following afternoon. She mentioned nothing specific, only that she had observed something of potential significance to his research interests. In 14 years, she had never made such a request, and she knew the weight of her professional reputation would ensure he took it seriously. As Ellie finally left the building, the rising sun glinted off the imposing facade of Harvard Medical School. For generations, these hallowed walls had witnessed countless breakthroughs, failures, and resurrections of abandoned ideas. Now they held one more secret: a lab technician's midnight rebellion against limitation and a nurse's decision to stand as ally rather than obstacle. Whatever happened next would challenge more than just scientific consensus about cellular regeneration. It would test the institution's commitment to recognizing brilliance regardless of its source. The following day crept by with excruciating slowness. Ellie moved through her routine duties with outward calm, but her mind continually returned to the images of Sarah's work and the meeting that lay ahead. At precisely 3:30 p.m., she made her way to Dr. Winter's office, a modest space despite his stature, lined with journals and family photos rather than the ostentatious diplomas that adorned many colleagues' walls. "Ellie," he greeted her warmly, gesturing to a chair. "This is unusual. In 14 years, I don't think you've ever requested a meeting." I haven't needed to until now," she replied, carefully closing the door behind her. "What I'm about to share with you needs to remain confidential. At least initially, it involves research that's being conducted, unofficially." Dr. Winter's eyebrows rose, but he nodded. "Go on." "Nasi." For the next 20 minutes, Ellie methodically presented what she had discovered, using the photos she had taken and her notes from the conversation with Sarah. She explained the modifications to the Kaufman protocol, the rhythmic approach to cellular stimulation, and the preliminary results that suggested a breakthrough where official research had declared only dead ends. "This is being done by a lab technician, working unauthorized hours with repurposed equipment?" Dr. Winters asked when she finished, his tone unreadable. "Yes," Ellie met his gaze steadily. "Someone whose insight and dedication deserve recognition rather than disciplinary action." Dr. Winters was silent for a long moment, tapping his fingers thoughtfully on his desk. "You realize what you're asking, Ellie? To consider research conducted outside all protocols by someone without credentials, using university resources without authorization. I'm asking you to look at the work itself," she countered, "not the path it took. Sarah Lynn has potentially solved what teams of Harvard's best couldn't. Does it matter that she did it at 2 a.m. instead of 2 p.m.? That she learned by observation rather than formal instruction? In academia? Yes, unfortunately, it matters very much." He sighed, then leaned forward. "But to me personally, as someone who has watched promising research directions abandoned for reasons that had nothing to do with their merit, no, it doesn't matter." He picked up one of the photos, studying it intently. "This arrangement, it's not standard protocol. It looks almost musical," Ellie finished for him. "Sarah was a cellist. She recognized patterns that others missed because she was looking through a different lens." Something shifted in Dr. Winter's expression, a spark of genuine interest, cutting through professional skepticism. "I'd like to meet her and see this work firsthand." Ellie felt a surge of cautious hope. "She'll be at the lab tonight. I told her I was bringing someone who might understand what she's accomplished. Then I'll be there." He checked his calendar. "I can clear my schedule after 8 p.m. That's still early enough to not raise eyebrows if I'm seen in the building." As Ellie rose to leave, Dr. Winters added, "No promises, Ellie. If the work isn't what you believe it to be, it is," she said with quiet certainty. "And once you see it, you'll understand why I came to you." The hours until their nighttime meeting stretched endlessly. Ellie completed her shift, then returned to the medical school at 7:45 p.m., making her way to Laboratory 7B, where Sarah was already setting up, nervous energy evident in her quick, precise movements. "He's coming?" Sarah confirmed for the third time, rearranging slides that were already perfectly aligned. "Yes, and he's coming with an open mind," Ellie assured her. "Dr. Winters lost his wife to Huntington's, a condition that regenerative therapy might eventually address. He cares about the work more than the credentials behind it." At precisely 8:17 p.m., a knock sounded at the door. Sarah froze, panic flashing across her face. Ellie squeezed her shoulder reassuringly before opening the door. "To admit Dr. Winters." "Dr. Winters, this is Sarah Lynn," Ellie said formally. "Sarah, Dr. Nathan Winters, head of neurology and former colleague of Dr. Miranda Kaufman." Sarah straightened her posture, visibly fighting the urge to shrink beneath the gaze of Harvard medical royalty. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Winters," she said, her voice steadier than Ellie had expected. "I understand how irregular this must seem." Dr. Winters surveyed the lab, taking in the careful arrangement of equipment and samples. "Irregular is one word for it," he said mildly. "Revolutionary might be another, depending on what you show me tonight." He set his briefcase down. "Convince me, Ms. Lynn. Show me what you've discovered that Harvard's official research teams couldn't see." For the next 2 hours, Sarah guided Dr. Winters through her methodology and findings with a clarity and precision that made Ellie swell with pride. She explained how she had recognized the rhythmic requirements of cellular regeneration, demonstrated the modified protocol in action, and presented meticulous documentation of results that showed consistent, reproducible success where official approaches had yielded only failure. Dr. Winters asked pointed, sometimes challenging questions, but never dismissive ones. He examined slides, reviewed data, and at one point spent nearly 20 minutes silently, observing a time-lapse sequence of cellular response that Sarah had captured. Finally, he straightened from the microscope and turned to face them both, his expression unreadable. "What you've done here," he said slowly, "is either an elaborate hoax, an extraordinary coincidence, or genuine innovation," Ellie finished firmly. "Yes." He fixed his gaze on Sarah. "Why did you pursue this? The Kaufman protocol was officially abandoned, resources reallocated, declared impossible by people with decades more experience than you." Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "Because they were wrong. And because Dr. Kaufman deserved better than to have her life's work dismissed as fantasy." There was fire in her voice now. "I heard researchers joking about it in the hallway, calling it Miranda's folly, but they weren't seeing what I could see in the data. They were so focused on making it work according to conventional wisdom that they couldn't recognize the actual pattern." Dr. Winters was silent for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "Miranda would have liked you," he said softly. "She had no patience for convention either." He gathered his notes. "I need time to verify these results independently, to run some control tests." Sarah's face fell slightly. "You don't believe me." "On the contrary, Ms. Lynn. I believe you enough to stake my reputation on properly validating your work." His tone softened. "What you've potentially accomplished here deserves rigorous confirmation. Not to disprove it, but to ensure it receives the recognition it warrants." Hope flickered in Sarah's eyes. I mean that starting tomorrow, you'll have authorized access to this lab during regular hours, as my research assistant." He glanced at Ellie. "Both of you, if you're interested, Nurse Chen, this project will need someone with your observational skills." Ellie felt a surge of unexpected emotion. In 14 years, no researcher had ever invited her to participate in their work, despite her extensive knowledge of patient outcomes and medical protocols. Yes," she managed, composing herself. "I'd be honored to assist." "Good." Dr. Winters checked his watch. "It's nearly midnight. We should wrap. Up here. Ms. Lin, I'll handle the necessary paperwork to formalize your new position first thing tomorrow. Until then," he gestured around the lab, "perhaps no more midnight experiments, at least not unauthorized ones." After he left, Sarah turned to Ellie, eyes wide with disbelief. Did that just happen? Did Dr. Nathan Winters just offer me a research position? He did, Ellie confirmed, helping her organize the lab for closure. But more importantly, he recognized the value of your work. That's the first battle won. She gave Sarah a meaningful look. There will be others. What do you mean? Academia can be territorial, Sarah. When word gets out that a lab technician without advanced degrees has potentially solved what Harvard's elite couldn't, there will be resistance, skepticism, attempts to discredit or co-opt your work. Ellie spoke from years of observation. Having Dr. Winters as an ally is significant, but this journey is just beginning. Sarah nodded. Slowly, a new determination settling in her expression. Then we'd better make sure the research is irrefutable. As they left the building together, the grand facade of Harvard Medical School loomed against the night sky, its windows mostly dark except for scattered lights where other dedicated souls continued their work. For generations, discoveries that changed human history had emerged from these hallowed halls, but rarely from the hands of those who cleaned the equipment or tended to the building's occupants in the quiet hours. Perhaps, Ellie thought as they walked in companionable silence, it was time for that to change. Perhaps what began with a nurse's 2 a.m. discovery and a lab technician's midnight rebellion would ripple outward, challenging not just scientific consensus about cellular regeneration, but deeper assumptions about who could contribute to humanity's most important questions. The next morning, true to his word, Dr. Winters began the process of officially bringing Sarah into his research team. He navigated administrative hurdles with the skill of someone who knew exactly which regulations could bend without breaking, which forms needed to be filed in triplicate, and which signatures mattered most. By noon, Sarah Lynn had a temporary research assistant badge, not standard protocol for someone with her background, but Dr. Winters had called in several favors and made pointed references to exceptional circumstances. For Ellie, the invitation to join the research effort presented a different kind of challenge. Her nursing duties couldn't simply be reassigned, especially during a time of departmental budget constraints. But with characteristic resourcefulness, she negotiated an arrangement with her supervisor. She would maintain her regular nursing hours, but be permitted to allocate 6 hours per week to interdepartmental collaboration, a vague designation that raised eyebrows but received reluctant approval. By week's end, a small, unconventional research team had coalesced around what they carefully referred to as rhythmic approaches to cellular regeneration, deliberately avoiding direct references to the Kaufman protocol until they had results substantial enough to withstand institutional scrutiny. Besides Sarah, Ellie, and Dr. Winters, the team included Jamie Rodriguez, a second-year graduate student known for brilliant work but controversial challenges to established methodology, and Dr. Lydia Park, a quiet but respected biochemist who had been one of Dr. Kaufman's few allies before her death. Their work proceeded with careful documentation and methodical testing. Sarah's initial findings underwent rigorous validation. Some experiments failed, requiring adjustments and refinements, but the core insight, the rhythmic approach to cellular stimulation, consistently outperformed conventional methods. By the 3-week mark, they had replicated her results across multiple cell lines, with success rates that bordered on revolutionary. Throughout this period, rumors began circulating through the medical school. Questions about why Dr. Winters had suddenly recruited a lab technician with no advanced degree. Whispers about unauthorized experiments and equipment usage. Speculation about what could be happening behind the now restricted access to Laboratory 7B. The first formal challenge came from Dr. Victor Reynolds, chair of the Department of Regenerative Medicine, an outspoken critic of the Kaufman approach. He appeared unannounced outside Laboratory 7B one afternoon, administrative forms in hand, citing concerns about resource allocation and protocol adherence. "I wasn't aware that your neurological research had expanded into cellular regeneration, Nathan," he said coolly, gaze sweeping critically over the lab where Sarah was carefully preparing samples, particularly into an approach the department officially abandoned as unviable. Dr. Winters met his gaze steadily. New evidence warranted reconsideration. Evidence gathered by... Dr. Reynolds glanced pointedly at Sarah's assistant badge. Unauthorized personnel conducting after-hours experiments? His tone made clear exactly what he thought of such irregularities. "Evidence now being properly validated under my supervision," Dr. Winters replied calmly. "With results that may interest the department significantly. I'll need to review these results myself," Reynolds insisted, "and question your methods." His gaze lingered on Sarah again, dismissive and cold. Ellie, who had been quietly observing from her workstation, stepped forward. "Dr. Reynolds," she said pleasantly, "perhaps you'd like to examine our latest cellular response data? It addresses several of the concerns raised in your last departmental review about the Kaufman approach." Reynolds blinked, clearly surprised that a nurse was offering scientific commentary. "And you are?" "Eleanor Chen, Nursing Department, 14 years at Harvard Medical." She handed him a tablet displaying their most recent test results. "You'll notice the rhythmic stimulation pattern produces sustained regeneration without the degradation your team predicted." For a moment, professional curiosity overcame prejudice as Reynolds studied the data. His brow furrowed. "This methodology isn't standard." "No," Ellie agreed. "That's precisely why it works." Dr. Winters stepped in smoothly. "Victor, I understand your concerns about protocol, but I suggest you review our preliminary findings before filing those forms. Unless, of course, you'd prefer not to be part of the conversation when we present our results to the board." A calculating look crossed Reynolds' face. Politics and prestige were always factors in academic medicine. Being on the wrong side of a potential breakthrough could damage even his considerable standing. "I'll expect a full briefing by next week," he said finally, lowering the administrative forms. "And this project should be properly registered with the department." "Already in process," Dr. Winters assured him. "We simply wanted sufficient validation before making formal announcements." After Reynolds departed, Sarah released a breath she'd been holding. "That was close." "That," Dr. Winters corrected, "was just the beginning. Victor won't let this go, not when it challenges work his department declared impossible." He looked thoughtfully at Ellie. "Quick thinking with that data presentation." Ellie smiled slightly. 14 years of watching academics joust has its benefits. I knew he couldn't resist looking at actual results, regardless of who was showing them." From that day forward, their unofficial team became increasingly formalized. Dr. Winters secured proper departmental registration for the project, carefully presenting it as an extension of neurological research rather than a direct challenge to the regenerative medicine department's previous conclusions. This administrative maneuvering bought them time to strengthen their findings, document their methodology, and prepare for the inevitable larger confrontations to come. For Sarah, the transition from hidden midnight researcher to acknowledged team member brought both validation and new pressures. Some colleagues treated her with outright skepticism, others with a condescension thinly veiled as mentorship. Yet her confidence grew as the evidence supporting her approach accumulated. When questioned, she no longer hesitated to defend her methods, often with a clarity that left more traditionally credentialed challengers struggling to respond. Ellie watched this transformation with fierce pride, stepping in strategically when institutional barriers arose, which they did frequently and sometimes insidiously. Missing equipment orders, delayed approvals, scheduling conflicts for key resources. The machinery of academic resistance operated in ways both subtle and effective. But Ellie had spent 14 years learning how Harvard Medical really worked, which administrators responded to charm, which to formal documentation, and which simply needed to believe an idea was somehow connected to their own previous work. By the 2-month mark, their research had progressed to the point where they could no longer avoid direct comparison to the officially abandoned Kaufman protocol. Dr. Winters called a team meeting to address the escalating situation. Reynolds has requested a formal review of our project, he informed them, his expression grave. The Department of Regenerative Medicine wants to evaluate the merit of continuing this line of inquiry. Translation, they want to shut us down, Jamie said bluntly. Or take control, Dr. Park added quietly. Miranda's work was valuable enough that they spent years trying to make it work. If Sarah has actually solved the fundamental problem, they'll want the credit, Sarah finished, her voice flat, and my name won't be anywhere near the publications. Dr. Winters didn't contradict her. They all knew how academic prestige operated. We need to prepare for this review very carefully. Our results are strong, but challenging established consensus requires more than just good data. It requires strategy. Ellie, who had been thoughtfully silent, looked up. We need to change the narrative. All eyes turned to her. Right now, this is being framed as unauthorized research that challenges departmental conclusions, that makes us the outsiders, the rule breakers. She leaned forward. We need to reframe it as the continuation of Dr. Kaufman's legacy, work that honors Harvard's commitment to her vision even after conventional approaches failed. Dr. Winters nodded slowly. Appeal to institutional pride rather than challenging institutional authority. Exactly, Ellie continued, and we need to present this not as Sarah versus established researchers, but as a collaborative breakthrough that demonstrates Harvard's excellence across all levels of its organization, from renowned neurologists to dedicated lab technicians. A unified front, Dr. Park mused. It could work. It might, Dr. Winters agreed, but Reynolds won't be easily outmaneuvered, and there's one more complication. He hesitated, glancing at Sarah. The review committee is insisting on speaking with you separately, Sarah, without the rest of us present. A tense silence fell over the room. They all recognized the tactic, isolate the perceived weakest link, then use their lack of formal credentials to discredit the entire project. Sarah squared her shoulders. Let them try. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she organized her notes for the individual review meeting. 4 days had passed since Dr. Reynolds had demanded she face the committee alone, and despite her growing confidence in her research, the prospect of defending her work to Harvard's elite without her allies present filled her with dread. The committee room in Longwood Medical's administrative wing was deliberately intimidating. Wood-paneled walls lined with portraits of medical pioneers, all men in formal attire with stern expressions, as if judging those who dared enter their domain. She'd arrived 30 minutes early, hoping to gather her thoughts in the quiet space, but instead found herself dwelling on all the ways she didn't belong. A gentle knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Ellie stood in the doorway, 2 cups of coffee in hand. Thought you might need this, she said, placing one in front of Sarah. Triple shot, gets me through the worst overnight shifts. Sarah accepted it gratefully. I didn't think anyone else would be here this early. I know these review sessions, Ellie replied, taking the seat beside her. They're designed to make you feel small before you even begin. She gestured to the portraits. Notice there's not a single woman on these walls, despite Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell graduating medical school in 1849. These rooms tell stories about who belongs and who doesn't. She sipped her coffee calmly. It's all theatre, Sarah. Remember, that. Dr. Reynolds has assembled 5 department heads, Sarah said quietly. All people who previously declared the Kaufman Protocol impossible. Of course he did. Ellie's voice held no surprise. He's not looking for scientific truth. He's protecting reputations, including his own. She turned to face Sarah directly. But here's what he doesn't understand. Those 5 people declared the protocol impossible because they approached it from the same perspective, with the same assumptions, using the same methods. You succeeded because you didn't. Sarah nodded slowly, drawing strength from Ellie's steady presence. I just wish Dr. Winters could be here. Nathan would be here if he could, but Reynolds specifically blocked his attendance. Ellie confirmed. So I came instead. Sarah blinked in surprise. You're staying, but Reynolds said no research team members in the room. Ellie corrected with a small smile. I'm here in my capacity as a nurse, conducting a standard wellness. Check on medical personnel under stress. It's protocol I'm particularly strict about observing. For the first time that morning, Sarah felt the knot in her stomach loosen slightly. Is that actually a protocol? It is now, Ellie said with a wink, created 14 years ago and selectively enforced when needed. Before Sarah could respond, the heavy door swung open. Dr. Victor Reynolds entered, followed by 4 colleagues. In formal attire, 3 men and 1 woman, all carrying tablets and wearing expressions of polite skepticism. Reynolds frowned when he spotted Ellie. Ms. Chen, this is a closed review session. Only committee members and Ms. Lin are permitted. Ellie stood, professional smile firmly in place. Dr. Reynolds, I'm conducting a standard wellness assessment, as required by Medical Staff Protocol 17B. Ms. Lin is currently under significant workplace stress, and institutional guidelines require nursing supervision during potentially adverse administrative proceedings. She handed him a form that looked impressively official. You'll find everything in order. I'll remain as a silent observer unless medical intervention becomes necessary. Reynolds scanned the document, his frown deepening. I don't recall this protocol. It's been on the books for 14 years, Ellie replied smoothly. Seldom invoked, but absolutely binding. I'd be happy to contact legal affairs for clarification if you'd prefer. The mention of legal complications gave Reynolds pause. Unnecessary delays would only draw more attention to a review he clearly hoped to conduct quietly and quickly. That won't be necessary, he said finally, but you are to remain silent throughout these proceedings. Of course, Ellie agreed, resuming her seat beside Sarah with a barely perceptible wink. The committee members took their places at the imposing table. Dr. Reynolds sat directly across from Sarah, with the others flanking him like a tribunal. He opened with clinical precision. Ms. Lin, you've been conducting research that directly contradicts established scientific consensus regarding the Kaufman Protocol for cellular regeneration. Research that began without authorization, using Harvard's facilities and equipment. After hours, despite having no formal qualifications beyond a bachelor's degree. He looked up from his notes. Would you care to explain? Sarah took a deep breath, feeling Ellie's reassuring presence beside her. I observed a pattern in cellular response that hadn't been documented in the official research. When I attempted To bring this observation through proper channels, my input was dismissed without consideration because of my position. She met Reynolds's gaze steadily. The science mattered more to me than the protocol. Dr. Amara Patel, the lone woman on the committee, leaned forward. You claim to have discovered something that teams of highly qualified researchers missed. That seems improbable. With respect, Dr. Patel, it's not improbable when you consider perspective, Sarah replied, warming to the scientific discussion. The established teams were all approaching cellular regeneration from similar training backgrounds, using standardized methods. I had the advantage of viewing the problem differently. She paused. I'm classically trained in music. I recognized that the cellular stimulation pattern being used was creating exhaustion rather than regeneration. The cells needed rhythmic intervals of rest, not constant activation. Dr. Gregory Hoffman, a silver-haired biochemist, scoffed openly. You're suggesting that playing the cello somehow qualifies you to rewrite cellular biology? No, sir, Sarah replied firmly. I'm stating that my musical training allowed me to recognize patterns of response and recovery that weren't being considered in the standardized approach. Science progresses when we bring new perspectives to persistent problems. Dr. Patel's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, from skepticism to something closer to curiosity. Show me, she said simply. With growing confidence, Sarah pulled up the comparative analysis they had prepared. Side by side, time-lapse footage showing cellular degeneration under the standard protocol versus sustained regeneration with her rhythmic approach. The visual evidence was compelling even to the untrained eye. In one sequence, cells clearly deteriorated. In the other, they flourished. This is from our most recent trial, Sarah explained, advancing to the statistical analysis. We've reproduced these results consistently across 17 different trials, varying both the cell types and the specific rhythmic intervals. The pattern holds. A silence fell over the room as the committee members studied the data. Even Reynolds couldn't dismiss the visible evidence, though his expression remained guarded. These results are noteworthy, Dr. Patel admitted finally, but they still contradict established research conclusions. No, Sarah corrected gently. They build upon them. Dr. Kaufman's fundamental theory was correct. She simply didn't live long enough to identify the precise stimulation pattern necessary for success. The teams that continued her work after her death never questioned the standard approach to cellular activation. My contribution was recognizing that a different pattern was necessary. Reynolds set down his tablet with a decisive click. Even if, and I stress if, these results prove replicable under strict supervision, there remains the issue of your unauthorized use of Harvard facilities and equipment, not to mention your lack of qualifications to lead research of this nature. Dr. Winters is the research lead, Sarah corrected. I'm providing specialized insight as part of his team. A team formed after you had already conducted months of unauthorized experiments, Reynolds pointed out coldly. Sarah felt a flicker of fear, but before she could respond, Dr. Patel intervened. Victor, let's not conflate administrative concerns with scientific evaluation. The data deserves consideration, regardless of how it was initially obtained. She turned to Sarah. I'd like to see your complete methodology documentation and the raw data from all 17 trials. Of course, Sarah agreed readily. Everything has been fully documented since Dr. Winters formalized the research. And before that, Dr. Hoffman asked pointedly. My notes from the early experiments are less formal but complete, Sarah admitted. I can provide those as well. Reynolds appeared ready to press further on the protocol violations, but Dr. Patel spoke first. I'd like to schedule a demonstration of your technique, in person with the committee present. This was unexpected, and potentially a significant turning point. Demonstrations were requested only when results warranted serious consideration. Sarah glanced quickly at Ellie, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. "We would welcome that opportunity," Sarah replied, working to keep her voice steady. Reynolds' lips pressed into a thin line, but he was outmaneuvered. "Very. Well, we'll reconvene next Wednesday for a practical demonstration. Until then, all experiments will continue only under strict supervision." He gathered his materials, clearly dissatisfied with how the session had unfolded. "This review is not concluded, merely extended." As the committee members filed out, Dr. Patel lingered behind. When the others had departed, she approached Sarah directly. "That was an impressive presentation, Ms. Lin," she said quietly, "particularly under the circumstances." "Thank you, Dr. Patel." "I knew Miranda Kaufman," Patel continued, her voice softening. "We were in the same cohort during our early research years. She would have appreciated your approach, both the science and the determination." She glanced toward the door Reynolds had exited through. "Not everyone here is opposed to unconventional paths. Some of us remember when medical breakthroughs came from unexpected sources." With a brief nod to Ellie, she departed. When the door closed behind her, Sarah let out a long breath and sank back into her chair. That was a victory," Ellie said firmly. "Not the final one, but significant. Dr. Patel requesting a demonstration means she sees legitimate potential in your work. Reynolds is still looking for ways to shut us down. Reynolds is looking for ways to save face," Ellie corrected. "There's a difference. He knows the science is solid. That's why he's shifting to administrative violations." She gathered her things. "Come on, we need to tell Nathan what happened and prepare for this demonstration. Reynolds will make sure it's as challenging as possible." As they walked through Harvard Medical's imposing corridors, Ellie's phone chimed with a message. She checked it and her expression darkened. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "Administrative notice," Ellie replied tersely. "I'm being called in to discuss inappropriate involvement in research activities outside nursing duties. Reynolds works." Quickly. Sarah stopped in her tracks. "He's targeting you now. Because you supported me." "Because I outmaneuvered him in that room," Ellie corrected without breaking stride. "Reynolds doesn't like losing, and he especially doesn't like losing to people he considers beneath his station." She tucked the phone away. "Don't worry about it. This isn't my first bureaucratic battle at Harvard." When they reached Laboratory 7B, they found Dr. Winters and the rest of the team waiting anxiously. Sarah recounted the review session while Ellie filled in details about the committee's reactions and Dr. Patel's unexpected support. "A demonstration is good news," Dr. Winters confirmed when they finished. "It means they're taking the results seriously enough to warrant direct observation." He turned to Ellie. "And this notice about your involvement." "Predictable retaliation," Ellie said dismissively. "Reynolds is trying to isolate Sarah by removing her allies." Dr. Winters' expression hardened. "I'll speak with the nursing department director. This harassment is unacceptable." "No," Ellie said firmly. "Let me handle it my way. If you intervene, it becomes a power struggle between faculty members with me as a pawn. I've navigated Harvard politics for 14 years. I know which battles to fight and how to fight them." Dr. Winters studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but if you need support, you'll be my first call," she promised. "Right now, we need to focus on making this demonstration irrefutable." For the next week, the team worked with renewed intensity. They refined their documentation, prepared multiple demonstration samples, and rehearsed explanations for every aspect of the methodology. Sarah spent hours practicing her technical presentation, determined to speak with authority despite her lack of advanced credentials. Meanwhile, Ellie attended her administrative hearing with the nursing department. When Reynolds' accusations were presented, that she had overstepped her role and inserted herself inappropriately into research matters. She responded not with defensiveness, but with a meticulously documented presentation on the historical contributions of nurses to medical research, from Florence Nightingale's statistical innovations to modern nursing research initiatives. My participation in Dr. Winter's project falls well within the scope of Harvard Medical's stated commitment to cross-disciplinary collaboration, she concluded calmly. Unless the administration wishes to formally retract its public position on the value of diverse perspectives in medical advancement, there are no grounds for restricting my professional activities. The hearing committee, caught between Reynolds' pressure and the potential public relations complications of disciplining a respected nurse for contributing to promising medical research, issued only a mild advisory note recommending clearer documentation of cross-departmental activities. It was effectively a victory. The day of the demonstration arrived with tension hanging thick in Laboratory 7B. The team had prepared 3 distinct demonstrations, one showing the failure points of the standard approach, one showing the success of their rhythmic method, and one demonstrating real-time cellular response to different stimulation patterns. Everything was meticulously labeled, documented, and arranged for maximum clarity. Reynolds arrived first, accompanied by 2 research assistants carrying additional monitoring equipment. "We'll be using our own verification systems," he announced, without preamble. "Standard protocol for demonstrations of this nature." Dr. Winters nodded agreeably. "Of course, we welcome the additional validation." The rest of the committee arrived shortly after, including Dr. Patel, who offered Sarah a brief, encouraging smile. Unexpectedly, 2 additional observers entered. As well, Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, Harvard Medical's Vice Dean for Research, and beside her an elegant woman in her 60s whom Sarah didn't recognize. Reynolds appeared startled by their presence. "Dr. Morgan, we weren't expecting you today." "The potential revival of the Kaufman Protocol warrants senior oversight," Dr. Morgan replied smoothly, "particularly given its significance to Harvard's research reputation." She gestured to her companion. "I believe you all know Dr. Isabel Kaufman, Miranda's sister and continuing trustee of her research foundation." A ripple of surprise passed through the room. Dr. Isabel Kaufman was a renowned immunologist in her own right, but more significantly, she controlled the substantial endowment her sister had established for continuing cellular regeneration research, funding that had been redirected away from Harvard after the official abandonment of Miranda's protocol. Dr. Winters recovered first, stepping forward to greet the distinguished visitors. "Dr. Morgan, Dr. Kaufman, we are honored by your interest. Please, let me introduce our team." As introductions proceeded, Sarah struggled to maintain her composure. The stakes had just risen dramatically. The original committee's evaluation would now be observed by Harvard's research leadership and the sister of the very scientist whose work they were continuing. Dr. Kaufman approached Sarah last, studying her with keen interest. "So you're the young woman who heard the music in my sister's science," she said quietly. Sarah blinked in surprise. Yes. How did you know about that aspect?" "Dr. Winters has kept me informed of your progress," Dr. Kaufman replied. "Miranda was a gifted pianist before she was a scientist. She often said that cells dance to rhythms most researchers were too tone-deaf to hear." Her eyes held a mixture of sadness and hope. "I'm very interested to see what you've discovered." With the unexpected additions to their audience, the demonstration began. Dr. Winters led the opening explanation, establishing the scientific context and the history of the Kaufman Protocol's development and abandonment. Then he turned the presentation over to Sarah. Despite her initial nerves, Sarah found her voice growing stronger as she explained her fundamental insight that cellular regeneration required rhythmic intervals of stimulation and rest, patterns that mimicked natural biological processes rather than the constant activation most researchers had attempted. She walked the committee through the comparative samples, pointing out the clear differences in cellular response under different protocols. The failure wasn't in Dr. Kaufman's fundamental theory, she explained, directing their attention to the time-lapse footage. It was in the application. Cells were being exhausted by constant stimulation, triggering protective shutdown rather than regeneration. Dr. Kaufman moved closer to the monitor, her expression intent. "Show me the interval pattern you're using." Sarah brought up the rhythmic stimulation chart she had developed. "We found that cells respond optimally to what we're calling a crescendo-decrescendo pattern, gradually increasing stimulation followed by tapering rest periods. It's similar to the breathing pattern observed in deep REM sleep, which is when the body conducts most of its cellular repair." Dr. Kaufman studied the pattern silently, then turned to Dr. Patel. "Amara, do you recognize this?" Dr. Patel looked confused. "Should I?" It's remarkably similar to the rhythm notation in Miranda's personal journals, the ones dismissed as irrelevant musical doodling in her lab notes. Dr. Kaufman looked at Sarah with new appreciation. She was trying to describe this exact pattern, but no one recognized what she was documenting. A moment of profound silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. Dr. Kaufman turned back to Sarah. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the microscope. "Of course." Sarah stepped aside, heart pounding. Dr. Kaufman spent several minutes examining the live samples, adjusting settings, and observing cellular responses as Sarah demonstrated the various stimulation patterns. Finally, she straightened and turned to face the room. "This is exactly what Miranda was working toward," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "The pattern recognition that eluded her teams after her death. Ms. Lin hasn't contradicted my sister's work. She's completed it." Dr. Morgan exchanged a significant look with Dr. Kaufman before addressing the committee. "In light of this remarkable demonstration and Dr. Kaufman's assessment, I believe we need to reevaluate the institutional position on this research direction." Reynolds attempted to redirect the conversation. "While the preliminary results are intriguing, there remain serious concerns about how this research was initiated. Unauthorized use of equipment, after-hours access, research conducted without proper—" "Victor," Dr. Morgan cut him off firmly. "Those are administrative matters, to be addressed separately. The scientific merit of the work stands on its own." She turned to Sarah and the team. "This demonstration has made clear that a significant insight was overlooked in our previous assessment of the Kaufman protocol. I'm authorizing continued research under Dr. Winter's supervision, with Ms. Lin's full participation as a key contributor." Dr. Kaufman stepped forward. "Additionally, the Kaufman Foundation would be interested in discussing renewed funding support for this specific research direction. Contingent, of course, on proper recognition of all contributors, including those whose insights might have come from unconventional backgrounds." The implication was clear. Harvard could either embrace Sarah's contribution or risk losing the prestigious Kaufman funding to another institution that would. Reynolds, recognizing the shifting power dynamics, fell silent. As the committee and observers filed out, Dr. Patel paused beside Sarah. "Well done," she said quietly. "Perseverance in science eventually overcomes prejudice, though often not nearly quickly enough." She glanced toward Reynolds' retreating form. "Be prepared. This isn't over yet." When only the core team remained, the professional composure Sarah had maintained throughout the demonstration finally cracked. "I can't believe Dr. Kaufman was here," she whispered, sinking into a chair. And that she confirmed that Miranda, Kaufman was trying to describe the same pattern all along. Dr. Winters smiled broadly. "Isabel's support changes everything. With her endorsement and the potential return of Kaufman Foundation funding, even Reynolds will have to back down." "For now," Ellie cautioned, "institutional resistance doesn't disappear overnight, especially when reputations are at stake." She glanced at her watch. "Speaking of which, I need to return to my nursing duties. Some of us still have regular jobs to maintain alongside revolutionary research." As she turned to leave, Dr. Winters called after her. "Ellie." She paused at the door. "None of this would have happened without you. You saw the potential that night on your rounds. You brought the right people together." Ellie smiled slightly. "What I saw was someone asking the right questions when everyone else had stopped looking for answers." She glanced at Sarah. The rest was just removing obstacles from her path. After Ellie departed, the remaining team members began organizing the lab, still processing the dramatic shift in their project's standing. Sarah carefully stored the demonstration samples, her mind racing with implications. What had begun as solitary midnight experiments had transformed into validated research with institutional backing and potential Kaufman Foundation support. "Dr. Winters," she asked hesitantly, "what happens now? With the research, I mean." He considered the question seriously. "Now we do the real work. Demonstrating the principle is just the beginning. We need to establish precise protocols, optimal patterns for different cell types, potential applications." He smiled at her. "And we need to prepare you for the scientific presentations and publications that will follow. Your name will be on this work, Sarah. That's non-negotiable." The idea of presenting their findings to the broader scientific community sent a wave of both excitement and terror through Sarah. Despite today's victory, she was acutely aware of her outsider status in academic medicine. "Will anyone take it? Seriously, coming from me?" "They'll have to," he replied firmly. "The results speak for themselves. And after today, you have Isabel Kaufman in your corner." He paused, studying her thoughtfully. "You know, there are alternative pathways to advanced scientific training. Special admission programs for researchers who've demonstrated exceptional capability. It might be worth considering." Sarah nodded slowly, both thrilled and overwhelmed by how dramatically her life had changed in the months since Ellie had discovered her midnight experiments. From hidden work in stolen hours to potentially continuing her education with institutional support, it seemed impossible, yet it was happening. That evening, as Sarah packed up her notes, her phone chimed with an unexpected message from Dr. Isabel Kaufman. "Would you be available for tea tomorrow? There's much more I'd like to discuss about my sister's work and your future. The Kaufman Foundation has always valued insight over credentials." Sarah stared at the message, tears welling unexpectedly. In all her midnight hours of work, hiding in Laboratory 7B with borrowed equipment and the constant fear of discovery, she had never imagined reaching this moment, standing in the light, her work validated, her future suddenly opening with possibilities that had seemed utterly unattainable. She typed a simple reply, "I would be honored," then gathered her belongings and stepped out into the evening. The imposing facade of Harvard Medical School glowed golden in the setting sun, its grand architecture a testament to tradition and established authority. Yet today, those traditions had bent, if only slightly, to make space for an unexpected voice. As Sarah walked across the campus, she spotted Ellie in the distance, still in her nursing scrubs, heading toward the hospital wing for her regular shift. The woman who had changed everything with a simple act of curiosity and kindness. During her 2 a.m. rounds, Sarah altered her path to intercept her. "Ellie!" she called. Ellie turned, smiling when she saw Sarah approaching. "How's our scientific revolutionary doing? Coming down from the adrenaline rush yet?" "Hardly," Sarah admitted. "Dr. Isabel, Kaufman wants to meet with me tomorrow about the foundation and my future." "That's wonderful news," Ellie said warmly. Though not surprising, Isabel Kaufman has a reputation for recognizing talent regardless of its packaging. "I wouldn't be having any meeting if you hadn't found me that night," Sarah said quietly. "If you hadn't seen potential instead of a protocol violation." Ellie's expression softened. "Sarah, what makes a good nurse isn't just medical knowledge. It's recognizing patterns others miss, seeing the human being beneath the symptoms, noticing what's important when others have stopped looking." She glanced toward Harvard Medical's imposing buildings. Institutions like this one are built to maintain order and tradition. Sometimes that's valuable, but sometimes it blinds them to the very innovation they claim to seek. They stood together for a moment, nurse and lab technician, two women whose roles were often overlooked in the hierarchy of academic medicine, yet who had together catalyzed what might become a significant medical breakthrough. "I should get to my shift," Ellie said finally. "But Sarah..." She waited until the younger woman met her gaze. "Whatever opportunities come your way now, remember what made your insight possible in the first place. Your willingness to see patterns from a different perspective. Don't let them educate that out of you." Sarah nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in Ellie's words. As she watched the nurse continue toward the hospital, she felt a surge of determination. Today's demonstration wasn't an endpoint. It was a beginning. They had won recognition, but the true challenge lay ahead, translating their discovery into treatments that could help actual patients, navigating the complex world of academic publishing and credit allocation, and continuing to push boundaries that institutional thinking had long declared fixed. Somewhere in Laboratory 7B, cells continued their rhythmic dance of regeneration, oblivious to the human drama surrounding their discovery. They simply responded to the patterns that fostered their growth, patterns that had always existed in nature, waiting for someone to hear the music hidden in their movements. Just as Miranda Kaufman had begun to hear it before her death, and Sarah had recognized years later during solitary midnight hours. The next morning, Sarah was surprised to find Dr. Winters waiting for her outside the research building, his expression unusually serious. "Sarah," he greeted her, "before you head in, there's something you should know. The department held an emergency meeting last night after the demonstration." Her heart sank. "Reynolds is still trying to shut us down?" "Not exactly," Dr. Winters said carefully. "Following Dr. Morgan and Dr. Kaufman's endorsements, that battle is largely lost for him. But institutional politics are rarely straightforward." He hesitated. "They're creating a new research initiative, the Kaufman Regeneration Project, with full departmental backing, priority lab access, and significant funding." "That's good news, isn't it?" "It should be," he acknowledged. "Except the announced research team doesn't include you or Ellie. They've listed me as a consultant, but the principal investigators are all from Reynolds's department." Sarah stared at him, the implications slowly sinking in. "They're taking our research." "They're attempting to," Dr. Winters corrected, "but they've miscalculated rather severely." A slight smile crossed his face. "For one thing, they don't actually understand your methodology. Not fully. The rhythmic patterns you developed are extensively documented in our notes, but the specific intuition behind their creation isn't something they can easily replicate. And for another, Isabel Kaufman has already contacted me this morning. It seems she was quite clear with Dr. Morgan about where the Kaufman Foundation funding would go, and it wasn't to any project that failed to properly credit the woman who solved what her sister had begun. His smile widened. I believe your tea with Dr. Kaufman today may prove even more interesting than you anticipated. The realization that Harvard was attempting to appropriate her work should have devastated Sarah. Months ago, it might have. But standing there in the morning light with Dr. Winter's steadfast support and the knowledge that someone as powerful as Isabel Kaufman was in her corner, she felt something unexpected. Not defeat, but determination. "So what do we do now?" she asked. "Now," Dr. Winters replied, "we continue our work, properly documented, methodically executed, and completely transparent. And we prepare for the next phase of this battle, which will be fought not in administrative meetings, but in the court of scientific proof and public recognition." As they walked together toward Laboratory 7B, Sarah's phone chimed with a message. From Ellie. "Heard about Reynolds' latest maneuver. Remember what I said about institutional resistance? This isn't the end. It's just the next challenge. See you at the lab after my shift. We have work to do." Sarah tucked the phone away, a new resolve strengthening her spine. The path forward wouldn't be easy. Institutional power rarely yielded gracefully to outsiders who challenged the established order. But for the first time, she wasn't fighting alone in midnight hours with borrowed equipment. She had allies who recognized her contribution, mentors who valued her perspective, and most importantly, results that spoke for themselves. Whatever came next, the truth of what they had discovered would eventually prevail. Cells didn't care about academic credentials or institutional politics. They responded to the right patterns, the rhythmic dance that nurtured regeneration. And in the end, that empirical reality would speak louder than any departmental decree. The Kaufman Foundation's annual Biomedical Symposium transformed Boston's Heinz Convention Center into a gathering of the world's elite medical researchers. Elegant banners displaying the distinctive Kaufman Helix logo hung from the ceiling, while digital displays showcased breakthrough research funded by the prestigious organization. In the main exhibition hall, Sarah Lynn stood beside a meticulously prepared presentation poster, explaining the rhythmic cellular regeneration technique to a small but growing audience of intrigued scientists. "The key innovation isn't just the rhythm itself," she explained, pointing to the time-lapse visualization, "but recognizing that different cell types require unique stimulation patterns, what we're calling cellular cadence fingerprinting. Each tissue responds optimally to its own specific rhythm." A distinguished neurologist from Johns Hopkins leaned closer to examine the data. "These recovery rates are remarkable. How are you addressing the immune rejection issues that plagued earlier regeneration attempts?" Sarah walked him through their latest breakthrough, a modification to the stimulation pattern that worked harmoniously with the body's natural immune responses rather than triggering defensive reactions. As she spoke, she spotted Dr. Isabel Kaufman moving through the crowd toward her display, accompanied by several board members of the foundation. "And here she is," Dr. Kaufman announced warmly as they approached. "Sarah Lynn, the researcher, who recognized what my sister was trying to codify all those years ago." The introduction carried unmistakable weight, a public endorsement from the Foundation's most influential figure. "Sarah, the board members wanted to see your demonstration personally." As Sarah began her explanation again, she noticed Dr. Victor Reynolds watching from across the hall, his expression unreadable. In the 3 months since the dramatic demonstration at Harvard Medical, the institutional conflict had evolved into something more complex than simple opposition. The formation of Harvard's official Kaufman Regeneration Project, without her or Ellie's inclusion, had initially threatened to appropriate their work. But Dr. Isabel Kaufman's intervention had been swift and decisive. No foundation funding would flow to Harvard without Sarah's formal recognition and participation. The resulting compromise was uncomfortable for all involved. Sarah and her team continued their independent research with Kaufman Foundation support, while Harvard's official project proceeded on a parallel track, the two groups nominally collaborating but effectively competing. The arrangement was unprecedented and precarious, with Sarah's outsider team producing breakthroughs that the institutional team was then forced to acknowledge. "Remarkable work," commented Dr. Margaret Chen, a senior board member, after Sarah completed her explanation. "I understand you're presenting the full findings tomorrow in the main session." Sarah nodded, trying to project confidence despite her anxiety about the upcoming presentation. "Yes, Dr. Winters and I will be presenting our complete methodology and latest results. Along with Nurse Chen, I hope," Dr. Kaufman added pointedly. "Her contributions should be acknowledged." "Absolutely," Sarah confirmed. "Ellie's insights have been integral to our progress, particularly in translating the cellular response patterns to potential clinical applications." As the Foundation representatives moved on to other displays, Dr. Reynolds approached, his professional smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Quite a turnout for your poster, Ms. Lin. The Kaufman name opens many doors." "The results speak for themselves, Dr. Reynolds," Sarah replied evenly. "Your team is welcome to review our complete data set. As always, we're committed to transparent collaboration." "Yes, collaboration," he echoed, the word carrying a sardonic edge. "Speaking of which, I wanted to inform you that Harvard Medical will be making a significant announcement during tomorrow's plenary session, something that may affect your independent research trajectory." Before Sarah could press for details, he was called away by a colleague, leaving her with a sense of foreboding. She immediately texted Dr. Winters and Ellie, who were attending different sessions. "Reynolds just hinted at a major Harvard announcement tomorrow," sounded ominous. Dr. Winters responded first. "Expected. They've been unusually secretive this past week. We'll discuss at dinner." Ellie's reply came moments later. Classic institutional power play, making their move on the biggest possible stage. "Stay focused on our presentation. That's what matters." That evening, the team gathered in Dr. Winters' hotel suite to finalize the presentation and discuss Reynolds' cryptic warning. Ellie arrived last. Still wearing the professional attire she'd chosen for the Nursing Innovation Panel she'd participated in earlier. A rare platform for nursing perspectives at the prestigious symposium. "So," she said without preamble as she joined them, "Harvard's planning something dramatic." Dr. Winters nodded, his expression troubled. "I've been hearing whispers all day. Apparently they've fast-tracked some aspect of the research we haven't been privy to. Something they're positioning as a significant advance beyond our work." Sarah felt a surge of anxiety. "How is that possible? We've documented everything meticulously. Our results are consistently stronger than theirs." "It's not about better science," Ellie said quietly. "It's about institutional leverage. Reynolds has resources we don't, connections with pharmaceutical companies, access to specialized equipment, dozens of researchers he can redirect to focused problems." Dr. Winters sighed. This was inevitable. The current arrangement is unsustainable. From Harvard's perspective, having an independent team, led by a lab technician no less, producing better results than their official project is a continuing embarrassment. "So what do we do?" Sarah asked, looking between her mentors. "We present our work exactly as planned," Dr. Winters said firmly, "with complete integrity and transparency. Whatever Reynolds announces, our results stand on their own merit." Ellie, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. There's something else we should consider, a possibility I've been tracking for weeks. They turned to her expectantly. Reynolds has been meeting regularly with representatives from Nexus Biomedical, she continued. They specialize in commercialization and patenting. Dr. Winters finished, his expression darkening. You think they're trying to patent aspects of the methodology? It would be the most effective way to control the research moving forward, Ellie confirmed. Secure intellectual property rights, then dictate who can advance the work and under what terms. Sarah stared at them in disbelief. But that's our work. They can't just claim it. Actually, they can try, Dr. Winters explained gently. Harvard has sophisticated legal resources and can argue that because you were using their facilities, even unofficially, they have claims to the intellectual property. But we've published our preliminary findings, Sarah protested. Everything is in the public domain. Not everything, Ellie pointed out. The refined cellular cadence fingerprinting technique we developed last month hasn't been fully documented in our public materials yet. If they've somehow replicated it, the implications hung heavy in the air. Their most promising recent advancement, the discovery that precisely calibrated rhythmic patterns could be tailored to individual patients' cellular profiles, dramatically reducing rejection risk, was still being validated. They had planned to present the complete findings tomorrow, but if Harvard had somehow obtained enough information to file patents first. I need to call Isabel, Dr. Winters said decisively, reaching for his phone. The Kaufman Foundation has significant legal resources of its own, and frankly, they have a vested interest in seeing this work developed ethically. While Dr. Winters stepped into the next room to make his call, Sarah sank into a chair, the weight of the situation settling over her. How did we get here? She asked softly. This was supposed to be about advancing medicine, not legal battles over ownership. Ellie sat beside her. Welcome to the reality of breakthrough research, Sarah. The history of medicine is filled with stories like this. Innovations that challenged established powers and were met with institutional resistance. She smiled slightly. But there's something Reynolds and Harvard haven't fully accounted for. What's that? You, Ellie said simply. The person who actually understands the science at its deepest level. No matter what legal maneuvers they attempt, they can't replicate your insight without you. The cellular cadence fingerprinting technique isn't just a procedure to be documented. It requires the intuitive understanding you bring to it. Sarah wasn't entirely convinced, but she appreciated Ellie's confidence. Do you think Dr. Kaufman can help? Isabel Kaufman is a formidable ally, Ellie confirmed, and she has personal reasons to ensure her sister's scientific legacy isn't exploited. But regardless of what happens tomorrow, we need to be prepared for the possibility that this conflict is entering a new phase. Dr. Winters returned, his expression more composed. Isabel is aware of the situation. She's already en route to the convention center to meet with her legal team. Whatever Harvard's planning, the foundation won't be caught unprepared. They spent the next few hours meticulously reviewing their presentation, ensuring every claim was solidly supported by data, every methodology precisely documented. Whatever announcement Harvard was planning, their best defense was the integrity and transparency of their work. It was nearly midnight when they finally dispersed to their rooms. Sarah tried to sleep, but found herself staring at the ceiling, mind racing with possibilities and uncertainties. The journey from hidden midnight experiments to presenting at the prestigious Kaufman Symposium had been extraordinary, but she now faced challenges she had never anticipated. Not just scientific obstacles, but political and legal ones that had nothing to do with the actual merits of their work. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the Boston skyline crisp against the blue October sky. Sarah, dressed carefully in the professional attire Dr. Kaufman had helped her select. Conservative enough for the medical establishment, but distinctive enough to set her apart. Her presentation was scheduled for 10:30 a.m., following the plenary opening session where, presumably, Reynolds would make his mysterious announcement. The main auditorium was already packed when Sarah arrived with Dr. Winters and Ellie. They found seats near the front, where Dr. Isabel Kaufman had saved places for them. The distinguished researcher looked remarkably composed, despite the late-night emergency consultations. "Whatever happens," she whispered to Sarah as they settled in, "remember that the science itself cannot be taken from you. My sister's work lived on despite institutional barriers, and so will yours." Before Sarah could respond, the lights dimmed and the Foundation's president took the stage to welcome attendees. After brief introductory remarks, he announced, "Our opening presentation today comes from Harvard Medical School's Kaufman Regeneration Project, led by Dr. Victor Reynolds. They've requested this platform to share what they're calling a significant advancement in cellular regeneration technology." Reynolds approached the podium with confident strides, flanked by two colleagues Sarah recognized from his department. The large screen behind him illuminated with Harvard's insignia alongside the Kaufman Helix. "Distinguished colleagues," he began smoothly, "the journey to realize Dr. Miranda Kaufman's vision for regenerative medicine has been long and, at times, controversial. Today, I'm pleased to announce that Harvard Medical School has achieved a breakthrough that transforms theoretical possibilities into clinical reality." He proceeded to outline a modified version of the rhythmic stimulation protocol, one that bore unmistakable similarities to their own work, though with subtle differences in terminology and framing. Sarah felt her stomach tighten as she recognized aspects of their unpublished findings incorporated into his presentation. "But the true advancement," Reynolds continued, "is the development of what we're calling the adaptive cellular resonance system, a proprietary methodology for individualizing regenerative treatments to patient-specific cellular profiles." Sarah's breath caught. This was their cellular cadence fingerprinting technique, rebranded and presented as Harvard's independent innovation. Beside her, Dr. Winters tensed visibly. "This morning," Reynolds announced with practiced gravitas, "Harvard Medical School filed comprehensive patents on this system, which we believe represents the key to translating regenerative theory into practical treatments. We're also pleased to announce a strategic partnership with Nexus Biomedical to accelerate clinical applications." A murmur swept through the audience. This was indeed significant news. Filing patents and announcing a commercial partnership signaled Harvard's intention to control the research direction moving forward. "While we acknowledge the contributions of various researchers to the foundational work," Reynolds continued, a thin smile directed briefly toward their section, "including Dr. Winters' team, the adaptive cellular resonance system represents a distinct advancement developed independently by Harvard researchers." The remainder of his presentation outlined impressive-sounding clinical applications and timeline projections. To the uninitiated, it would appear that Harvard had not only resolved the fundamental challenges of the Kaufman protocol, but had advanced it to near commercial readiness. When Reynolds concluded to significant applause, Sarah felt physically ill. Everything they had worked for, the breakthrough insights, the careful validation, the potential to help countless patients, was being systematically appropriated and enclosed behind patent walls. Dr. Kaufman leaned over. "It's a masterful move," she whispered, "but premature. They've overplayed their hand." Before Sarah could ask what she meant, the Foundation president returned to the podium. "Thank you, Dr. Reynolds, for that exciting announcement. As is customary, we'll now proceed to our scheduled presentations. First, we'll hear from the independent research team whose work on rhythmic cellular regeneration has been directly supported by the Kaufman Foundation. Dr. Nathan Winters and his colleagues will present their latest findings. Reynolds' expression flickered briefly as he took his seat. Clearly, he had expected his announcement to dominate the morning session, not to be immediately followed by their presentation. As they made their way to the stage, Dr. Winters whispered rapidly to Sarah and Ellie, "Change of plan. We're going to address this directly. Follow my lead." Once at the podium, Dr. Winters surveyed the audience calmly. "Distinguished colleagues, what you just witnessed was a fascinating example of scientific politics at work. Before we present our actual research, I believe some context is necessary." He proceeded to outline with diplomatic precision the full history of their work, beginning with Sarah's unauthorized midnight experiments, Ellie's discovery, and the subsequent institutional resistance they had encountered. Without directly accusing Harvard of appropriation, he made the timeline unmistakably clear. Their team had developed and documented these techniques months before Harvard's claimed independent development. Rather than address the complex ownership questions that Dr. Reynolds has unexpectedly thrust upon this scientific gathering, Dr. Winters continued, "I'll simply turn the presentation over to the researcher who actually developed the rhythmic regeneration protocol and the cellular cadence fingerprinting technique, which you just heard described under a different name." Sarah approached the podium, heart pounding but resolve strengthening. This moment, standing before the world's leading medical researchers to defend work that had begun in secret midnight hours, was surreal. But as she began speaking, explaining the genuine science behind their discoveries, her nervousness transformed into clarity. She walked the audience through the actual methodology, not with Harvard's polished corporate framing, but with authentic scientific detail. She explained the musical principles that had informed her approach, the precise relationships between cellular responses and rhythmic stimulation, and most importantly, the ethical implications of keeping such techniques accessible rather than locked behind proprietary barriers. The fundamental insight driving this work, she concluded, is that cells respond to patterns that respect their natural rhythms. Similarly, medical advancement responds best to collaborative patterns that respect natural scientific processes. Observation, hypothesis, testing, and transparent sharing of results. Attempting to enclose this knowledge prematurely risks stifling the very innovation we're all seeking. To her surprise, the audience responded with enthusiastic applause, significantly warmer than what Reynolds had received. As they moved to the demonstration portion of their presentation, Ellie joined them, explaining the clinical implications with the practical insight that only an experienced nurse could provide. From her position at the side of the stage, Sarah noticed Isabel Kaufman engaged in intense conversation with the Foundation's president and several board members. Reynolds and his team were conspicuously absent, having left the auditorium midway through their presentation. After they concluded, to another round of applause, Dr. Kaufman intercepted them as they left the stage. Haku tat. "Outstanding presentation," she said quietly. "The Foundation Board is calling an emergency session for this afternoon. Reynolds may have powerful institutional backing, but his tactics have not gone unnoticed." She glanced toward the exit. "I need you all there at 4 o'clock, room 712. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of scientific sessions and supportive colleagues stopping by to express concern about Harvard's aggressive maneuver. By mid-afternoon, The symposium was buzzing with discussion about the obvious conflict, many researchers openly questioning the ethics of Harvard's patent filing, given the clear overlap with the independent team's previously published work. At precisely 4 o'clock, Sarah, Dr. Winters, and Ellie arrived at room 712, a secure conference room in the Convention Center's executive wing. Inside, they found Dr. Kaufman with the Foundation's complete board of directors and a distinguished older man Sarah recognized as Malcolm Bennett, one of Boston's most prominent patent attorneys. "Thank you for coming," Dr. Kaufman began without preamble. "The situation has escalated significantly since this morning. Harvard's legal team has already sent formal notices to the Foundation asserting full intellectual property rights over the regenerative techniques and demanding cessation of any independent research." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "They're trying to shut us down completely." "That appears to be the intention," Mr. Bennett confirmed. "It's an aggressive opening position in what they clearly anticipate will be a protracted legal battle." Dr. Winters shook his head in disgust. "This isn't about advancing medicine anymore. It's about control and credit." "And money," Ellie added quietly. "The potential commercial applications are worth billions." Dr. Kaufman nodded grimly. "Which is precisely why the Foundation Board has called this meeting. The Kaufman Foundation exists to advance medical science, not to enrich institutions or corporations. My sister's vision was always about helping patients, not securing patents." She gestured to the Foundation president, who stood to address them. "We've spent the afternoon consulting with our legal team, and we've reached a decision that may offer a path forward. The Foundation is prepared to invoke the special provisions of our Harvard funding agreement. Provisions that have never been activated before." Mr. Bennett elaborated. "When the Kaufman Foundation established research funding at Harvard, Dr. Miranda Kaufman insisted on including specific clauses regarding intellectual property derived from her protocols. Essentially, any innovations based substantially on her work must remain accessible for further research, with commercial applications subject to Foundation approval. Harvard will argue that their adaptive cellular resonance system is distinct from the original Kaufman protocol," Dr. Winters pointed out. "They can argue that," Mr. Bennett agreed, "but the documentation you've maintained creates a clear lineage from Dr. Kaufman's original work through Ms. Lin's innovations. More importantly, Dr. Isabel Kaufman as her sister's successor and a recognized authority in the field can provide expert testimony regarding the connection." Sarah struggled to process the implications. "So you're saying the Foundation can block Harvard's patents?" "Not entirely," Dr. Kaufman clarified. "But we can force a completely different arrangement, one that acknowledges all contributors fairly and keeps the core technology accessible for research purposes." "There's something else to consider," Ellie interjected, her expression thoughtful. "Harvard's reputation. They value their public image as an ethical leader in medical research. A protracted legal battle over appropriating work from their own researchers, particularly when one is a former maintenance worker's daughter who made a breakthrough while working as a lab technician. That's not a narrative they want in the public sphere." The Foundation president nodded appreciatively. "Precisely, which brings us to the proposal we'd like to put forward, with your agreement, of course." For the next hour, they outlined a strategic response that was both legally sound and ethically principled. Rather than engaging in a direct legal confrontation, the Foundation would leverage its considerable influence to propose a collaborative framework, one that would recognize all contributions, maintain scientific accessibility, while still allowing controlled commercial development. "The key," Dr. Kaufman emphasized, "is presenting this as an opportunity for Harvard to demonstrate leadership rather than appearing to back down. Reynolds and his team will receive full recognition for their contributions, but they cannot erase yours. Most importantly, the core techniques will remain available for broader research purposes, with commercial applications developed through a newly established joint initiative. As they worked through the details, Sarah felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that they had powerful allies, disappointment at the necessity of compromise, but also a growing understanding of how scientific progress actually occurred. In the real world, it wasn't the pure pursuit of knowledge she had imagined during those solitary midnight hours in Laboratory 7B, but a complex interplay of genuine discovery, institutional politics, and human ambition. By the time they finalized their strategy, evening had fallen over Boston. The Foundation would formally respond to Harvard's legal notices the following morning, initiating a process that would likely result in intensive negotiations rather than courtroom confrontation. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Kaufman took Sarah aside. "This isn't the outcome you deserved," she said quietly. "In an ideal world, your contribution would have been recognized without this conflict." "I just wanted to solve the problem," Sarah admitted. "To complete what your sister started. I never thought about patents or credit, which is precisely why you succeeded where others failed," Dr. Kaufman replied. "You approached it with pure scientific curiosity, not career advancement." She smiled slightly. Miranda was the same way, always more interested in the puzzle than the prize. She handed Sarah a small velvet box. Inside was an elegant silver pin bearing the Kaufman Foundation helix symbol, a recognition normally reserved for grant recipients with distinguished scientific careers. "The board voted unanimously," Dr. Kaufman explained. "Regardless of how this legal situation resolves, you've earned your place in the Foundation's scientific community. And more importantly, you've honored my sister's legacy by approaching her work with the same integrity and insight she brought to it." Sarah blinked back unexpected tears. "Thank you. That means more than any patent or publication." When they rejoined the others, Ellie was engaged in intense conversation with the Foundation president, gesturing emphatically as she made some point about patient access. Even amid legal crisis, she remained focused on the practical implications. For healthcare, the perspective that had made her such a valuable member of their team from the beginning. That evening, the three of them gathered in the hotel restaurant, emotionally exhausted but strangely unified by the day's dramatic events. They had faced institutional power at its most formidable and, while the outcome remained uncertain, they had not been overcome. "To unconventional collaborations," Dr. Winters toasted, raising his glass, "and to whatever comes next." "Which is what exactly?" Sarah asked, the reality of their situation settling in. "Even with the Foundation's support, Harvard has resources we can't match, and Reynolds won't simply accept a compromise." "No, he won't," Ellie agreed. "Which is why we need to be prepared for what happens after the lawyers finish negotiating. The real battle will be in the lab, proving through results and publications that our approach is not just scientifically sound, but clinically superior." Dr. Winters nodded. "Reynolds is counting on institutional advantage to eventually overshadow your contribution, Sarah. Our job is to ensure that doesn't happen. By continuing to innovate, by maintaining meticulous documentation, and by building alliances with other researchers who value the science over the politics." Sarah considered this, drawing strength from their confidence. "So we keep working," she said finally. "No matter what Harvard claims legally, they can't patent the truth of how cells actually respond. And they can't stop us from continuing to understand it better." "Exactly," Ellie affirmed. "Institutions move slowly, but science doesn't wait. While they're filing papers and holding meetings, we'll be advancing the actual research." As their conversation continued, Sarah realized that despite the day's disheartening politics, her fundamental commitment remained unchanged. She had begun this journey seeking scientific truth in midnight hours, driven by curiosity and determination rather than ambition. Those qualities had carried her from hidden experiments to the prestigious Kaufman Symposium. They would carry her through this challenge as well. Outside the restaurant windows, Boston's lights glittered against the night sky. Somewhere across the city, Harvard's legal team was undoubtedly strategizing their response to the coming foundation challenge. Reynolds and his colleagues were planning their next maneuvers. The institutional machinery was in motion, powerful and implacable. But here, in this moment, three unlikely allies, a neurologist who valued truth over tradition, a nurse who saw beyond her designated role, and a former lab technician who heard music in cellular patterns, were planning too. And they had something Reynolds and Harvard didn't fully understand: the power of genuine innovation unbound by conventional thinking. Whatever legal documents might eventually be signed, the scientific journey they had begun would continue. Cells would dance to their rhythmic patterns, regenerating tissue and possibility with equal measure. And somewhere, Sarah liked to think, Dr. Miranda Kaufman was watching with approval as her interrupted work flowed forward in unexpected hands. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.